You'd think reading a law would be simple, right? It's just words on a page. But what happens when those words are confusing? Today, we're cracking open the legal code. We're going to look at the secret rule book judges use when the law itself just isn't clear enough.
Okay, let's start with something simple. Picture a sign at a park entrance. It just says, "No vehicles in the park." Seems pretty clear, right? But what about an ambulance in an emergency? Or a kid on a skateboard? What about a toddler on a little tricycle? All of a sudden, that simple rule gets really complicated. And that right there, that's the heart of the problem. Words on a page, they're often just not enough. Now, let's scale this up. Forget the park sign. Imagine we're talking about a law that could affect someone's life, their freedom, their home. The stakes are, well, they're incredibly high. So how in the world do we agree on what a rule actually means? Well, let's dive in. All right, first up, we're going to look at what are called specialized laws. And no, we're not talking about your average traffic ticket. We're talking about the really dense, complex stuff, the laws that deal with life and death issues like criminal justice and even taxes.
Yeah, the official term for these is special statutes. Think about it. These are laws that have to be super specific because they cover really complicated things. You know, like the mind-numbing details of tax code, or the nitty-gritty science in environmental law, or getting the definitions just right in criminal law. And here's a crucial point from our source material. For lawyers and judges working in these areas, this isn't just some dusty textbook theory. Knowing how to read these laws, really read them, is everything. It's the foundation of their entire job. It's where the rubber really meets the road.
And check this out. This is where it gets really interesting. Reading a law isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. Just look at this comparison. For criminal law, the guiding principle is simple. If there's any confusion, the decision has to favor the person accused. It's all about protecting individual rights. But then you look at tax law, and whoa, it completely flips. The goal there is to protect the government's money, so any confusion is usually interpreted in a way that makes sure people can't avoid paying taxes. We're talking two totally different ways of thinking.
Okay, so if the rules change depending on what kind of law it is, what's a judge supposed to do? How do they make the right call? Well, that brings us to the main idea of this whole explainer, what I like to call the judge's toolkit. It's a collection of principles they use to find some clarity when things get messy. You've got to understand, when a law is foggy, judges don't just guess. They're not flipping a coin. Instead, they reach into this toolkit. It's filled with these time-tested principles. The official name is Rules of Construction, that are designed to help them figure out, logically and fairly, what the law was actually trying to say.
Let's pull out the first tool. It's called the rule of lenity. Now, this one is a big deal, and it's used only in criminal law. It's basically a major safeguard for our freedom. The rule is this. If a criminal law is confusing or could be read in two different ways, the judge has to pick the version that's better for the accused person. It's pretty much a direct line from the whole innocent until proven guilty idea. Okay, tool number 2 is called beneficial construction. This one is way broader. It's not just for one type of law. This principle tells judges, hey, look beyond just the exact words on the page. Figure out what this law was trying to do and interpret it in a way that promotes fairness, justice, and what's best for the public. And our source material nails it here. It says the whole point is to avoid unjust or inequitable outcomes, especially for people who are already at a disadvantage. See, this rule isn't about just winning a legal argument on a technicality. It's about making sure the law actually leads to real human justice. All right, our last tool is for a really weird situation. What happens when a law seems to argue with itself? It's called harmonious construction. Basically, it's a judge's job to take two parts of a law that seem to be in conflict and find a way to make them, work together in harmony. The goal is to make the entire law make sense as one complete package. I love this quote from our source. It says, the court has a duty to avoid a head-on clash between two parts of the same law. Think about that. A judge can't just say, well, I like this part better, so we'll ignore that other part. Nope. Their job is to find the middle ground, the harmony that lets both sections do their job. So, there's the toolkit. We've got the rule of lenity, beneficial construction, and harmonious construction. But theory is one thing. How do these actually play out in a real case? Let's take a look at the toolkit in action, because this is where these decisions have huge, real-world impacts. This is a great case for the rule of lenity.
back in 2008, there was this case, United States versus Santos. A federal law said it was illegal to use the proceeds from illegal gambling. Simple enough, right? Wrong. The law never said what proceeds meant. Does it mean every single penny that came in, the total revenue, or just the profit left over at the end? The word was totally ambiguous, and since it was a criminal case, what did the Supreme Court do? They pulled out the rule of lenity. They chose the definition that was better for the defendant, just the profits. And how about harmonious construction? Let's look at a major case from India, Maneka Gandhi v. Union of India. So here was the problem. The Passport Act basically said two opposite things. First, people have a fundamental right to travel abroad. But second, the government can also restrict that right. So what do you do with that? How do you make those two ideas work together? Well, the court came up with a really elegant solution. They said, okay, the right to travel is fundamental, but the government can restrict it, but only if the restriction is fair, reasonable, and for a good reason like national security. It can't just be random. See? They made both parts of the law work. Okay, let's pull back for a second. We've looked at the problem of confusing laws. We've looked at the tools judges use. But why does any of this matter to you and me? Why is all this legal jargon so important? Well, because this whole idea of interpretation, it's literally the foundation of a fair legal system. Think of these principles, lenity, harmony, all of them, as the guardrails on a highway. They're what keep the entire legal system from swerving off the road. They ensure that laws are applied in a way that's predictable and fair, and they stop judges from just making things up or using their power unfairly. This final quote from our source really drives it home. It says that you should avoid interpreting a law in a way that makes one part of it totally useless, because harmonization is not equivalent to destruction. In other words, a judge's job isn't to destroy a law or pick it apart, it's to make it work. And all of this leaves us with one last big question to think about. If the laws that govern our lives aren't just simple instructions, if they need this whole toolkit of human judgment to work fairly, then what does that really say about the role of a judge? Are they just calling balls and strikes? Or is their job something much, much more complicated?